Hello, everyone. I'm Jay Lidke, the Senior Vice President here at Flexera. I'm also privileged to be on the governing board of the FinOps Foundation. Good to see you all. I've been involved in the FinOps community now for quite a number of years, and through that time, it's seen some incredible growth. I have really good memories participating in the very first FinOps X event in Austin. I've been to many more since then, and we've come a long way. We've seen the FinOps community expand organically, far beyond its initial public cloud roots. The foundation recently revised its mission statement to acknowledge this evolution, to now focus on technology value. Whether it's SaaS, data center, licensing, now of course AI, they're all in scope for FinOps practitioners. You don't have to take my word for it. I encourage you to look at the data within the 2026 State of FinOps report from the foundation, and also the 2026 State of Cloud report from Flexera. I don't want to leave you hanging. Let me share a couple of interesting stats from those reports. 98% of FinOps teams now manage aspects of AI spending. 90% also now manage SaaS services, or at least plan to in the next year. Value and ROI have replaced the focus on just savings and optimizations. Value delivered to the business is now used by about 64% of teams as a KPI. Again, incredible growth and expansion of FinOps globally. If you weren't already aware, Flexera's role in all of this is to help organizations unlock technology value at scale. It is my pleasure today to welcome you to our FinOps Forward event. Today, you'll be training with some FinOps champs who will share insights around the habits, operating models, and teamwork that make the difference. Kicking things off, we'll have a keynote from IDC, touching on macro trends around FinOps, AI, and technology spending. Following that, we're going to hear from Flexera's own Jeremy Chaplin. He's going to speak to you on FinOps strategies for the technology value era that we now all live in, and how to win at the AI cost game. Third up today will be a panel of FinOps practitioners exploring how teams are applying recent FinOps shifts and scopes in the real world. Finally, as the cleanup hitter today in today's agenda, we're going to hear from my good friend Steve Trask from the FinOps Foundation about the future of FinOps. Steve's going to sail us into the sunset framed by beautiful palm trees with his closing keynote. We have a jam-packed agenda to say the least, but before we hit the go button, I wanted to offer you a gift for attending today. As many of you know, Flexera recently acquired Prosperops, and they have a savings analyzer. It's driven tremendous value, and I've seen it, in the wild doing wonderful things. Now, what it does is identifies opportunities for maximizing cloud discount instruments and benchmarking you against peers. So powerful stuff. If you want to learn more about this, take advantage of this QR code. Now, without any further delay, I'd like to pass the baton to Jevin Jensen, who's joining us from IDC to kick things off with this exciting keynote. Over to you, Jevin.
Thanks, Jay. We're big fans of the FinOps Foundation at IDC. As a matter of fact, as we go through the presentation today, if you look close enough, you may see a few references to the FinOps Foundation. Also, don't worry about trying to capture every data point as we go through the presentation. You'll be able to download all this content at the end of the virtual summit. Again, my name is Jevin Jensen. I'm a research vice president here at IDC, and I cover the intelligent cloud. The intelligent cloud is a market that you use to manage your public or private cloud. And we have a very generous definition of public or private cloud. That also includes the edge. But it's anything to manage, monitor, automate, or optimize your public cloud. Because if you're not optimizing your business and providing value, then you're really not doing a good job and having a competitive advantage. I've actually got 3 FinOps Foundation certifications, and hopefully we can share some best practices on how you can move your FinOps team forward today. Let's first start with the agenda. We've got several opportunities with our budgets for 2026, but also some challenges, as you can imagine, as well. Then we're going to go into the industry and a market overview and just talk about the intelligent cloud and the FinOps market in general. Then the meat of the conversation today will really focus on giving you actual practical advice, real world examples, along with data to back that up on how to mature your FinOps teams, how to adopt AI for FinOps, and then also how to do FinOps for AI, and then a look at the agentic future that we're all hearing so much about these days. Well, let's start with just like an overview of the kind of the top 3 themes that I'm seeing in the market today. First, the hybrid cloud is still king. It's here. It's not going anywhere. We thought maybe it'd start to dwindle, but it's back as strong as ever, especially with AI, and we'll touch on that a little bit further. But only really about 7% of global companies are purely in the public cloud. So the vast majority, 90+%, are in this hybrid mode. And of course, that includes the edge as well. AI, that's the theme for today. We're going to talk about how you can grab the gold. The Olympics have passed us up. They're completed now, but it's still a common theme. And we want to make sure that you don't fall into the same pitfalls that we've had before as people migrate to the cloud. Now you've got AI projects, both on-prem and in the public cloud. We want to make sure we can capture these costs as you move from pilot into production and make sure you hit those ROI targets. And then FinOps maturity. We'll talk about the adoption of FinOps, which is amazing over the last few years, but the maturity level, maybe not quite as amazing. A lot of people are in the lower end of that, and give you some tips on how you can move ahead in your journey to mature your FinOps teams. All right, let's start with the budgets. This is fairly positive news. Over 60% of you told IDC at the end of last year that your budget for this year, 2026, was going to increase. 60%. That's pretty amazing. When we looked at that same stat from a year ago, only 39% told us your budgets were going up for 2025. And it's not just that they're going up. If you see that box over there on the left, the mean increase of your budget from last year to 2026 is over 14%. So a double-digit increase, that's pretty strong. And we want to help you invest that and get the best bang for your buck. And so we ask companies, drilling into that number, what are the areas that you plan to invest in and how can we help you? And we found that, sure enough, AI agents, even though there's a lot of hype in the market, sometimes we worry that the vendors are just trying to push the next shiny object to make more money, increase their sales out there. But this is coming from 1,000 enterprises, not vendors, that told us that, number one, with 45% of their new investment plans were going into agentic AI to really help improve their business processes. And then we're looking at number 2, of course, cybersecurity resilience. That has been in the top 3 for as long as I can remember. So it's always a matter of, is it going to be number 2 or number 3? And that makes sense. It's an ever-changing landscape. You've got to continue to invest in there with your new budget monies. And then finally, even though we've been moving to the public cloud for 14, 15 years now, still almost 32% of you are spending money as if one of your top areas is to migrate applications from on-prem to the cloud. So that's a long-term journey for many of us. Now the recession. This poll was actually taken before any of the outbreaks in the Middle East, any of the spike in oil prices, geopolitical problems. Of course, they've been around for a while, but they seem to have gotten increasingly challenging in 2026. 69% of you told us that it was either likely or very likely that we would have an encounter recession before the end of this year. So if you're thinking back at my past, sometimes I get a budget, it had an increase in it, but then something would happen either internally or externally to the business, external challenges like we're seeing today with the spike in oil prices and things like that. And you have to give back some of that budget mid-year or in the second half of the year. So we need to be aware, yes, we've got strong budgets for 2026, but something could happen geopolitically or with a recession, and we may have to give some of that back. So let's optimize our current spend and make sure we get our biggest bang for the buck as possible. So I mentioned the intelligent cloud that I monitor and run for IDC. As you can see, it's it's a large market. Again, FinOps is just a subset of this larger market. It includes the automation, the management, the optimization of your public or private cloud. It was over 23 billion in 24. And we just now getting the data for 2025, but we expect that to be over 20% higher. So you're talking about 26, 27 billion when the final numbers for 25 are out. And we project the forecast for the market to grow at a healthy 14% and be at 45 billion by 2029. So people are investing not just into the public cloud, but managing it from a financial standpoint, from a performance, from an optimization standpoint. As you can see, I cover automation, IT service management, and the operations, anything to manage that public cloud or private cloud. So it's a very healthy market, very large market that also includes FinOps. Let's drill down into the FinOps. That's what we're here to talk about. These are the top 7 vendors by market share for 2024. Again, we'll be updating this for the 2025 data shortly. And you can see the top 3 vendors, at least, or actually the top 4 vendors, all had acquisitions in 2024. There are a lot of FinOps vendors, especially when you're talking about the niche or smaller vendors out there. And so you're starting to see acquisitions and mergers pick up in 2024. And of course, this does not include Flexera's recent announcements in 2025. So that will probably move them up into the number 2 or number 1 spot for this coming report because those are not included yet. But lots of acquisitions, and you can see here the top 7 vendors by market share. It's the first time we've reached over $2 billion in just FinOps tools and subscription revenue, and it was up a healthy 21% in actual spend from the prior year. So let's get into your teams and what you're facing. I mentioned the adoption earlier, and it's just really incredible to see an 87, almost 88% adoption of FinOps. I cannot find any reference of FinOps from 2019 or earlier. So, and this data was taken at the end of 2025. So in just 5 years, we went from didn't exist to 88% adoption. I've talked to other people at IDC that have been here longer than I have, 20, 30-year veterans. And whether you're talking about Agile or DevOps, DevSecOps, AI Ops, SREs, all these different processes and concepts that we see in IT, this adoption beats all of those as far as the amount and the speed to get to this near full adoption at 88%. So the average team size is 8, as you can see there. That includes both part-time and full-time practitioners. So a lot of part-time folks in there that have different roles in the company, but to participate in the FinOps meetings and help with the implementation of the recommendations. And then also, I included the typical size of a cloud center of excellence. That's important because, at least at IDC, we see a lot of FinOps teams reporting to the cloud center of excellence. A lot of them are moving to cloud center of enablement. But regardless of what you call it, FinOps teams report to the CIO or one of these CCOEs quite often. So that's a pretty common place. Now we're talking a little bit about the scope of FinOps. So this is important because it's not just about the regular compute network and storage. When we first migrated to the public cloud, trying to optimize that, trying to find the right savings plan, et cetera, for those teams. Expanding the scope is really important for a number of reasons, mainly because SaaS and PaaS, if you combine those two and compare it to that more traditional cloud computing, that spend can be equal or greater to what you're spending in the public cloud for just those more traditional virtual server type of instances. And there's a lot of business value in there. So whether you're talking about your Salesforce or your ITSM, collaboration platforms, all kinds of SaaS tools that are out there. I think there's IDC tracks over 25,000 different SaaS providers. I think there's something in the Wall Street Journal recently about the SaaS apocalypse coming because AI is going to disrupt the SaaS market, but I would not worry about that. The SaaS market is here to stay. There's so much value. It's very sticky. It's providing, benefits like HR, payroll, all these really necessary business capabilities and at a great value. So you're going to see that locked in for a long period. So how do we handle that? How do we surface these costs as a FinOps team? Because the telemetry is totally different. They've got different API, a different download. The focus standard is fantastic that the FinOps Foundation promotes for the big hyperscalers, but there's very few SaaS providers that have joined into that so far. So you're kind of having to figure out that telemetry, how to get that data into your tool, into your platforms on its own. And of course, you've got, speaking of platforms, the data management platforms like the Snowflakes, the Databricks, et cetera. Those are often 7-figure spends from enterprises. So big spend in that. How do you control that? That's completely different than managing a seat license in an HR SaaS tool, for example. So we've got to figure all that out, and how can we pull all that into a platform? Because it is important to expand that scope, but then we want to make it visible, and then we want to optimize it, of course, as well, so we get the best return and provide our procurement teams with negotiation tools when those renewals come up as well. So now let's look at our first advice. So we've been talking about the FinOps teams and maturity. Really, standardization is key to this whole concept. We want to come up with a standard way of reporting, benchmark ourselves, at least to start with. How are we doing in the past? How did we do in the future with our forecast? Really coming up with those standards and the metrics that we want to monitor. That's going to be key to moving you from, let's say, pre-crawl. I know some of you are in the crawl, but we've got some real new companies that have just started with FinOps in the last 6 to 12 months, and they're kind of in that pre-crawl stage. Is that concept that I made up? But they need to move into where they are starting to monitor, measure themselves, and then ultimately benchmark themselves against competitors. And at least me personally, I prefer a platform-centric approach where you can pull in all that data. We talked about SaaS being able to pull that into one tool. Again, there's so many tools out there, over 130 FinOps players in the market. You can have 5 or 6 of those, and I have niche for each one of them. But then I worry about the adoption, the integrations, and the ease of use and training when you have that many different different capabilities. So a platform approach that covers SaaS, covers PaaS, as well as traditional, both on-prem and private cloud spend is essential. And then we want to leverage our budgets. If we do have budgets, do we need to add an AI module, for example, to our FinOps tools? Is that an extra charge? And do we want to add that? And how will we utilize that? Do we need to expand the seat licenses as we grow our FinOps teams? Things like that to leverage these budgets that we have for 2026. And then, as I mentioned, expanding the scope so you have a more comprehensive and transparent reporting process to your business. So we want to provide a real life example of each one of these suggestions and advice. So we'll start with a healthcare provider for this maturing FinOps. They focused on tagging, which is a key concept, especially if we want to move from walk to the run maturity level. And getting that tagging right, and then actually allocating through chargebacks over 90% of your cost. That was their stated goal. They were able to meet that, this healthcare provider, and it really became a strategic partner to the business. Once they had that in place, then they can start dabbling and seeing how unit economics can provide even greater visibility and really move from just cost optimization into investment strategies and really be a strategic partner to the business, providing over $1 million in savings after they got to that key threshold of 90%. All right, we're going to move into the next topic, which is FinOps for AI. And we just put out a paper last year on this at IDC talking about how it is so different, an AI project, when you're trying to manage that, especially figure out the cost and the ROI calculations up front. Hopefully you're getting your FinOps teams involved in those projects and not doing them as one-offs with the line of business owners only, because the costs are so different. And it's not just the GPUs. Everybody's aware of that. You see my number 6 bullet point down there. A lot of people are aware that there's data management and ongoing cost with the data management and the cleansing of that to make AI really work and be reliable for your organization. But there's also things like network infrastructure, low latency storage, things that just a typical ERP or warehouse management project that we've been doing for decades now is totally different than those type of projects. Additional legal reviews, all the governance that you want to put in place. Is it public data? Is it private data? Are we using RAG? All these different concepts that just are not part of a traditional project. So we came up with a list of all of these different elements, but I've highlighted some of the big ones there that we don't want to miss because it is so different. So that makes it really critical to get FinOps teams involved up front. So as you're looking at FinOps for AI, again, applying our normal FinOps concepts to an AI project, cloud security and cloud AI are the top areas that companies are reporting, again, at the end of 2025 to IDC, that these are areas where they found a lot of underutilized resources. So I want to share that and make sure that you guys are looking at these two areas. There's a lot of pilot AI projects out there. Maybe they were successful, maybe they weren't. And we want to make sure that we are looking for either discontinued resources, those zombie servers out there, or just something that are maybe over provisioned and scaling those back to save money and provide additional investments elsewhere. If you look at companies, not quite half, but 41% said they found 15% of their AI spend was completely wasted because of some of these issues with the cloud security or cloud AI as part of these projects. And if you're not being involved, you feel like you're being left out, different business owners, executives are doing their own thing, not involving the FinOps team in their AI projects, you're not alone, because only about 7.5% of companies have fully embedded those FinOps into their AI projects. So we need to work on that. There's a big opportunity there to help companies move out of this pilot phase into production and also hit their ROI targets at the same time. Recommendations for FinOps for AI. As I mentioned, it is different in many different ways. I list some of the different tools that the hyperscalers provide there. You actually need to use different tools to look at some of these costs and make sure that's integrated with your FinOps platform to pull in these costs and get this more granular level, different types of API costs, et cetera, web services costs that the different hyperscalers provide. So you've got to educate your teams. Hey, we need to use these free tools like we do in conjunction with our paid FinOps tools, but there's a different amount of data, there's a different approach, different terminology, et cetera. So we really need to invest in training both of our FinOps teams and our line of business owners of these AI projects. And of course, we want to cost optimize those like we always do, but the tagging needs to be different. Again, you can't tag a virtual server the same way that you do a cost from SageMaker or Bedrock or one of these AI services that are out there, all the different SaaS providers that we talked about earlier. So that's going to have a new approach. You may have to adapt or customize your tagging processes and policies as well, because it is more than just optimizing GPUs. There's a lot of different technologies that you need to work out. Finally, tokens, that's another unique charge or that you want to optimize for AI. But if you can get on the front end, we really want you to consider, should I go with these usage-based tokens, or is there another option? Can I go with more of a traditional cloud virtual server, more of a time-based where I'm just signing up for so many compute hours and so much capabilities there and put my models on my own servers? Or do I want to use these token-based and have it hosted like in a web service or a SaaS provider? So we gave some examples of some of the math there, but that's something we want your FinOps teams to consider and move forward with. So moving into a real world example of that. So we'll look at a global insurer. They had, as you can imagine, multiple AI, specifically agent pilots running in parallel. They hadn't gotten their FinOps teams fully involved, but they educated them, brought them into the process, looked at these pilots that were running and said, okay, if we had an ROI, are we meeting it? Some of the projects didn't have ROIs or calculations at all. So let's do those calculations and then prioritize them. And they were able to find 6 million in quick wins where they could say, let's discontinue these lower returns and plow that into the higher return AI agentic use cases and really ultimately save 17 million over the course of a year. So big money bringing in the FinOps teams, helping them to right size, not just the GPUs, but other idle resources that may be out there or just low ROI type projects. I always like to talk about people. We've mentioned people a couple of times, the teams, the size of the teams, the capabilities there. I mentioned the FinOps Foundation. This was the first one, the top ranked skill was actually AI cost management. I'd already mentioned that we need to train our teams, invest in our folks. And the FinOps Foundation found that 58% ranked that as the top skill is just to have a new AI cost management skill for their team members of the FinOps teams. Moving into the IDC data, we found that having a tool that utilized AI and ML under the covers was also important at almost 79%. So a lot of people want to have that in their FinOps platform tool. And then when you look at the AI projects themselves that we just spoke about, lacking those skills impacted 37%. So over a third of the projects were impacted because they didn't have enough AI skills on their teams, whether it be engineering or the FinOps, either one. So let's look at a little bit more survey data. When you're looking at the tools, again, we're talking about the FinOps for AI at this point. 2/3 of the teams found that their current tool did support either AI or ML type capabilities. And almost the same number, 70%, said they'd be willing to pay for that. So if you have a FinOps tool and you want to leverage AI for that tool, then companies are willing to pay for it. And a majority of the tools do have it already. So it's maybe a module you just need to turn on. So we encourage you to look at that. And then again, getting into how do you want to pay for that? Would you rather it be usage-based like tokens or more of a license or seat or hybrid approach? You can see that most people do want to go with that token usage base for their AI or Gen AI when they're talking about their FinOps solution and enabling that new module. So I mentioned, I'll start over on the right here, the adoption of the cloud is still, after all these years, a decade and a half or so, we've just crossed the 50% threshold. So about 54% have moved into the public cloud, but around 46% are still running production workloads on premise. And this is important because we need that tool, our FinOps tool, to be able to, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not doing SaaS and PaaS as part of your reporting and your optimization, you're missing a big chunk. But if you're not doing your private cloud, you're also missing a big part of the cost cost of running your organization, running your cloud infrastructure. So we want to capture that. And then looking at where companies are going to invest in the next 12 months, that's over on the left. The public cloud is about very even, 67% versus 70% plan to invest more than 10% into the private cloud versus the public cloud. So we're going to be investing in both clouds in the future. So it's not like all the investments going towards the public cloud. Actually, slightly more companies say they're going to invest more than 10% at least. And I consider 10% a significant investment. That's why we drew the line there into their private cloud. So it's really important to capture that. And AI in your FinOps tool can help you capture both public, multi-cloud, as well as private. So let's talk about the advice for AI for FinOps. You can see we polled companies and said, what are the top 2 strategies you're trying to use to control cost? And they're trying to use AI to manage both their portfolio and the life cycle. So those are great tools to automate your FinOps team and those recommendations. So that's my first bullet as well, is to use your FinOps tool. When you really combine the automation and the AI recommendations that you get out of a tool, to get those into production quicker, I call that smart automation. So you're combining the automation, you're combining those recommendations, you're not letting them sit there for days or weeks after the tool has already generated those. You're either automatically or at least through workflow implementing those in a more automated manner, as opposed to just manually going through your DevOps teams and getting those recommendations in, which could take weeks or months. You're really leaving that money on the table. Forecasting AI in your FinOps tool is great for doing those what-if scenarios, for looking at your seasonality and your trends, and really providing and improving that future forecasting, which is so important to the business these days. And then, of course, you can use actually Gen AI to help break down the silos. So if you've got a lot of business owners out there, maybe they're not the most technically savvy or financially savvy, but they can ask questions, they can customize reports and dashboards using Gen AI, and just ask those questions in a natural language and get the reports back that they need to look at their projects and to get their own reporting out of the FinOps tools, as opposed to waiting or you generating it for them. So some real world examples of this. AI for FinOps, we've got an ERP software firm. They had deployed an AI-enabled strategy for their FinOps teams to really automate, essentially the block storage that they had in their cloud, to right size it, to continually monitor that. They put the guardrails in to make sure that they would always have storage. It wouldn't disconnect or shrink it down too far, but it was in an automated fashion, not waiting for those reports to come out or that bill to come out once a month. And that really provided them with a lot more insights. And then they were actually able to increase that and customize and add their own agents for more real-time automation of other issues, and resulted in a $2.3 million savings by optimizing the storage, and also additional EC2 savings that they saw after they started deploying agents to monitor that as well. So let's talk about our history. Sometimes it's new technology, the way that we as IT teams implemented it, or we were forced to implement it maybe in some cases. It didn't turn out the best, to be candid. So we have NT4O boxes. That's when I was first starting out in IT, inheriting, maybe you did as well, hundreds of NT4O boxes, physical boxes. And he said, well, it's got to be a better way. And of course, there was with virtualization in the 2000s. But then we started seeing VMs sprawl, like, zombie VMs. Like, what was this for? Who created this? It was almost too easy, and they would just sit out there and just chew up resources and storage and space. Then the public cloud, we talked about that. 15 years we've been trying to migrate to the public cloud. But then we had somebody that needed data, so they added GCP. Somebody else needed collaboration. They added Azure. Then they wanted a web service, so AWS. Before we knew it, we had 4 or 5 different cloud providers. Maybe we got some through an acquisition, so we had public cloud sprawl. And now what I'm seeing coming, and I'm worried about, is these AI agents and the sprawl and the unmanaged. Like we saw with the public cloud, you had this spike in cost. We had to come up with this whole concept of FinOps to manage this. What are we going to do about AI agents before it gets out of control? So if we drill into the numbers on agentic AI, you can see there's millions of them already today. But when you think about how many employees there are, how many companies there are, it's still very, very new, very, very small startup so far. But we expect that to increase by 80-fold. So you're going to very quickly get to 1 billion agents by the end of last year, first of 2026. And if you think of that, it's more of like your company. If you're a decent sized Fortune 1000 company, maybe 10,000 employees, you could have 6,700 agents by the end of this year, start of next year. So 6,700 agents is probably well more than the number of virtual servers or even cloud servers that you have today running your organization. What are these servers and agents going to be doing? Well, by 2029, they're going to be doing hundreds of billions of transactions. They're already doing over 100 million today, but by the end of this decade, which is only 3 or 4 years away, we're talking about hundreds of billions of transactions and embedded into the business. So what are we going to do? Do we have standards around protocols? Are we going to let line of business owners start up with shadow IT? What are we going to do about inventory of these agents, et cetera, before these get out of control? So this is a little bit of the advice here, as well as, unfortunately, a real world example. We're already finding approximately 1.5 million, even though we don't have that many running today. Over 10% are unmonitored today. So who knows what they're doing? Is there security vulnerability? What happens when they go down? Resiliency. How is that going to happen? Because I'm worried that shadow IT is coming back with a vengeance when it comes to these AI agents, and how easy they're going to be to create in the near future, how easy they're going to be able to purchase if you want a standard agent with the swipe of a credit card. And they're going to be embedded in mission critical processes literally in the next overnight, in the coming few weeks or months. And we don't want this to impact your business, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot and repeat the mistakes of the past, where we didn't have a good inventory of our cloud or our virtual servers, and we ended up spending way more money and also having unnecessary downtime. So this is the agent sprawl. I want to stop this. I want to encourage you to adopt this agent-to-agent communication. Find out what the protocol is. Maybe you want to use MCP, but define that protocol. Put in those guardrails, maybe with your legal, with your procurement, to stop some of this shadow IT like we had to do maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And let's do the same thing with AI agents, and make sure we have these standards ahead before we have to go back and retroactively clean that up. We want to make sure that our observability and our management and our monitoring tools can do this, because resiliency of a Java application may be totally different than a very nimble AI agent that can go and talk to other agents. So we need more granular observability and management of these agents, so we know what we're paying for, but we also know how to troubleshoot it if performance is an issue or downtime. And let's just not repeat this movie again. We've seen it before, as I showed on that timeline, and nobody wants to go back there. So let's try and get ahead of this before it overwhelms us. All right, in conclusion, I'll just wrap it up. We talked about the maturity of FinOps teams, how you need to invest in your teams, look for the metrics, the benchmarking, as well as these capabilities to move your teams forward. The FinOps for AI is important, as well as AI for FinOps. As well as let's just really prepare our AI agents and make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes that we had before. And now I'll wrap it up and hand it over to our next speaker.
Good day, everybody, and thank you for joining the session today. We're going to be talking a little bit about FinOps strategies in the technology value era, and specifically about how we can win in the AI cost game. A big thanks, of course, for Jevon from IDC for his session. Some super useful statistics and some learning for me there, for sure. So let's get started. I'm Jeremy Chaplin. I lead the FinOps practice here at Flexera globally. Super lucky to be working with a team of cost specialists, FinOps advisors, solution architects, and technical account managers that are helping our customers be successful in the FinOps space. And a great opportunity to connect with you all today. Really looking forward to sharing with you some insights here. We're sticking, of course, with the Olympic theme. So our road to gold here, FinOps in the AI era. What does it really look like in the market today with the introduction of AI and the proliferation of AI spend? And then we're going to tackle this new event. How do we as FinOps practitioners wrestle with the costs, the visibility, the new challenges that AI brings? Let's get a bit of understanding there. And of course, rather than work harder, we're going to be looking at how we train smarter here and maybe leverage AI to tackle the problem itself. great, of course, using it to run workloads and have FinOps to drive value out of our AI costs, but maybe we can use it to help ourselves with some of the complexity that we face there. And then, well, this isn't a single race, unfortunately. We're competing here across every scope. Looking forward, of course, to hearing from Steve from the FinOps Foundation, but the FinOps practitioners out there will know now that really the FinOps framework isn't just for our cloud spend. It covers all of your technology spend. And of course, when we think about AI specifically, that, of course, spans a number of domains. And then hopefully we're home for the win. We're on the podium here. Really looking forward to taking some questions from you that I'll hopefully be able to answer here live today. Please post them in the chat on the Q&A panel here. And then when we get to the end, I'll be able to kind of close things out and hopefully answer some of those questions. So let's dive in. Road to goal. What does FinOps look like right now in the AI era? And of course, some big numbers from Jevin from IDC, but even bigger numbers here, $2.something trillion in AI spend, a forecast from Gartner. And this was a forecasted number back in 2025. You'll see as I go through some of the deck here, we have more accurate and up-to-date numbers from Gartner, and the projections are just getting bigger. Now, this tells us, of course, that this is a mammoth problem for us to address. Right? Not only have we seen prolific growth in cloud spend and technology spend generally, but AI is outpacing that, growing massively to be really the top source of technology cost for all organizations today. And I've even seen some statistics, more recently that talk about, tech spend, AI spend, cloud spend actually exceeding companies' investment in human capital. Right? This is how important it is becoming for organizations in order to tackle this challenge. So what does that challenge look like? What challenges are you as an organization facing? And again, you think of something different, please pop it in the chat or save a question for later. But we're struggling to manage this prolific growth here. 44% year on year. As I say, the latest projections around $2.5 trillion in AI spend. And visibility, always a struggle for sure. Getting insight into where that cost is going, where the spend is going, who is generating the cost. But it's not always a cost conversation, is it? It's also about sustainability data and other metrics that are important to your business. It's great to use AI to produce your PowerPoint deck or a framework template or produce a custom image. But what is the cost of that and how is that measured? And then what is the implications of that from a kind of carbon emissions perspective? So AI bringing additional complexity. Cloud was a big change, certainly in my lifetime during tech. AI is a step up. It's a level up in terms of the complexity. We already had bursty workloads and things that was auto scaling. Well, that can never be truer now than, in the AI space. We've got complexity in how things are built and all of the kind of models and changes that underpin the kind of cost drivers. We need to get smart here. We need to be thinking about autonomous ways of dealing with that. And of course, we're going to look at AI for FinOps as we go through the agenda today. So don't want to, of course, take away from Steve's session later. He'll be joining us, from the FinOps Foundation. But of course, there are some interesting stats here. The FinOps Foundation mission sits at the top of this page. And hopefully those of you that are close to the foundation know, of course, the change recently at the end here, not just advancing the people who manage the value of cloud, but now the people who are managing the value of technology. Real recognition here that the problem is more than just public cloud, and indeed that the framework itself is so well positioned to help us manage that technology spend wherever it sits. And then we can see, of course, right to left, the ever increasing number of practitioners, right? This is practitioner-led data from the state of FinOps by the foundation, telling us that up to nearly all, 98% of practitioners are managing AI spend. And ultimately, for me, I see that as being driven by an aggregate of AI in SaaS, AI in your private or public clouds, AI sitting in the data center. And importantly, then, what about licensing? What about software? Because ultimately, we're all using software powering, our applications and our infrastructure here. So real recognition, I think, in the marketplace around the challenges that we're facing today. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention before we kind of jump in and look at how we can, leverage FinOps for AI and AI for FinOps is where the kind of challenge first starts. And I see this as being actually initially a procurement problem, right? We have to go out and buy and procure the software, the infrastructure, the models, and everything else that are powering our AI, whether we build it ourselves, whether we buy it ourselves. So at the point of procurement, when I'm buying a license, or I'm buying the number of tokens, or I'm buying conversations or resolutions, which are these new, charging and pricing and usage-based models that are being introduced for AI, this is where I have the opportunity to negotiate the price per the assist, price per resolution. And in order to do that effectively, of course, I need an aggregate understanding of what I'm spending, what I'm using, and with the vendors. So just think a little bit about, how early in the journey this starts. The FinOps Foundation, of course, would talk about shift left. Can we optimize before we've actually built and run these things? And of course, in this context, absolutely we can, if we think about it at the point of procurement. All right, so let's jump in. The new event, FinOps for AI. How do we leverage FinOps to look at our AI spend and kind of manage the cost in the way that we've been successfully doing for public cloud? Back to the statistic that we saw earlier, 98% of you are saying, as practitioners, we're being asked to manage AI spend. So this is not a problem that's a niche issue, right? You're all facing these challenges and all wrestling with that to some degree. Flexera, however, runs their own survey, the State of Cloud report. We have the 2026 version out here, and I would encourage you to go and look at that. Some interesting statistics for sure. But no surprises, I guess, in the top challenges that we see for managing those AI workloads. And we've kind of touched on these a little bit as we've gone through so far. Unpredictability, the difficulty, in forecast, understanding usage patterns, maybe things that we've just started to grasp when we were dealing with public cloud and the volatility of usage-based billing, but made even worse by the complexity and the bursty nature, of AI consumption. And then we've got challenges in the infrastructure layer, GPU, CPU. How do we do those things? Maybe, we're kind of used to working and doing kind of right-sizing tasks, but we've not just got the challenge there, we've got the challenge at the data layer now as well. How is my GPU and CPU consumption impacted by the training that I'm running, which is underpinned by the data and data clouds potentially that I'm using here? So complex pricing, all of those new terms, all of those new usage characteristics that the vendors are using in order to monetize their AI services that we're buying. Challenges, of course, as I've said, in the data. And lastly here, a lack of mature FinOps practices. I'm surprised this is only, kind of 12%, but I guess relative to the other challenges here, it kind of underpinned by the challenges and the skills gaps that we all, know exist as we start to tackle the new technologies that are being introduced here. And thinking about that, right, the challenge expands into being, again, a new visibility gap that we have, right? We had this challenge, of course, with public cloud and a lack of tooling, and the problem is now proliferated to be, well, all of those domains, all of those scopes where you're running infrastructure that is powering AI, powering this $2.5 trillion. And if we can't solve that gap, then we can't address the kind of capabilities that we're now familiar with using when we think about the FinOps framework, right? We can't do our budgeting and forecasting and address those issues around volatility. We can't, build a show back and charge back model. How do we understand how we could procure or negotiate anything? And then, of course, the governance models and licensing and dealing with that kind of challenge. So lots of issues that if we don't get proper visibility of the spend and where it sits, we're going to be really challenged in terms of trying to address that. So, managing your AI adoption and spend and understanding what you're buying and what you're building is really important for us to differentiate and think about. Jevin had a couple of stats actually that I took note of as I was watching his session, right? SaaS to PaaS is dominating AI spend. Thinking about that, right? What is the AI that you've purchased here? And he also said usage and tiering in SaaS pricing creates risk. absolutely those different pricing models and usage models that we're wrestling with here. So you can see the correlation, understanding what we've bought, understanding how it's priced, but also then wrestling with the challenge that exists in the public cloud domain, the things that I'm building already, my new models. How do I bring these together? And I have to do that by bringing FinOps, traditional FinOps in the public cloud, and SaaS, together. And that's why we're seeing that high statistic of 90% or plus of SaaS practitioners saying that they're being asked, or FinOps practitioners saying they're being asked to, manage SaaS costs as well as cloud costs. So we also need to have an understanding of what's driving that spend, right? If we don't know the business drivers and the drivers of cost, then of course we're blind to be able to optimize that. And we may be a little bit familiar with the infrastructure level. It's quite similar, of course. It's compute and it's storage that is running these AI workloads and AI applications that we have. And of course, the objective here is to match that usage, whether it's CPU or GPU, to the demand that we have. But that, becomes even more challenging when we don't know how many tokens, how many outcomes, how many chats, how many conversations are going to be had here. So certainly something to think about. But then also in the storage space, we add some additional complexity here in terms of the data processing. AI underpinned typically by big data, whether it's lake houses or whatever storage that you're using, often by the Databricks, Snowflake, organizations. The data clouds is, I think, the terminology that the FinOps Foundation are using. And we've got to look at that challenge quite seriously. There's a lot of cost, not just in the storage, but the analytics of that. And then if that data is then underpinning models and the training that we need to do, having that data in the right shape and normalized and as efficient as possible is really going to impact the cost. And then lastly, we sit on top of that AI models, which also, if you don't pick the right model for your use case, has a fundamental impact on cost. So we really need to start to think about, well, do we have the right personas? Do we have the right skills, the right knowledge, and the right people around the table? Is it a data scientist that I need to actually bring into these conversations, as well as my engineer and my finance person and my license person and FinOps persona? So just think broadly about, what you know about these, where the expertise sits in the organization as you're thinking about tackling and wrestling this problem. Now, of course, we want to be smart about what we're doing, and there's opportunities here which are great and very exciting for us to leverage AI to tackle the problem itself. Flip the coin around a little bit. What can we use AI for to help us on that FinOps journey? And here at Flexera, we've heard, of course, from our customers asking us to leverage AI for what they want to do, not just, of course, in helping them understand the growing AI spend and where it exists across, a complex estate. Again, Jevon mentioning hybrid cloud and most customers running some sort of hybrid environment. So we need that visibility across all scopes, but also bringing AI capabilities to, the platform to help in terms of reducing spend, produce automatic recommendations, produce autonomous outcomes using agents and so on, as well as kind of natural language interaction. And we'll come and talk a little bit more about that. And obviously using, the data that we have then in a clean, curated way, normalized way to power our customers' applications themselves. Because success in the AI space right now is definitely about the underpinning data. If you can't put the right data in, then we know that the outcomes are not going to be the things that you desire. So AI-powered value from Flexera One is really, the foundation of our platform, built, of course, in a secure, compliant, and reliable way. But the magic happens at the inventory layer. This is where we've got data across all of the different scopes that we've described: hardware, the software, the AI spend, the cloud spend, and it's enriched and normalized. And that's really important, because if I've got a workload running over here and it's running a particular license, but I can't correlate that with the licenses that I've purchased from the vendor, as a software asset manager, how do I know whether I could use that license to drive out cost and get rid of a pay-as-you-go license and bring my own we know, of course, the SKUs and the naming conventions are often very different here. So having that normalized layer is really important. And we have the ability to enrich it. Let's say, for example, bringing sustainability data to the inventory data that we have so that you can understand not just the cost impact, but the carbon impact of the changes that you want to make. Now we sit AI insights over the top of that, okay? And that's where we can be super successful here, having that data layer, as we said, super accurate. Then the insights that we produce, we have confidence in, and of course, configured in our applications, your business context. How does that spend map to applications, departments, cost centers is really critical in making sense of the recommendations that we produce in the context of your own business, right? The business context, of course, key to making decisions. And then lastly, adding automation and agentic AI onto those kind of solutions, already things in place that we'll talk about with things like ProsperOps that are managing commitment purchases for our customers, and our Kubernetes solution, Ocean, that is running and provisioning workloads, in spot compute to power, Kubernetes environments at reduced cost. So lots of opportunities there to use automation to make our lives easier. So drilling into that just a little bit further, we've got both sides of the coin here. We've got AI for FinOps, okay? Asking questions in a natural language approach, getting tailored insights, getting some insights really that maybe you're not going to make yourself because you can't, possibly as a human, process and analyze the massive amounts of data that underpins that. And then, of course, using AI-powered automation to do some of those complex things or do some of those things at scale, again, that it's not possible to do, human-powered. And then the other side of the coin, FinOps for AI, making sure that we've got the visibility and a set of recommendations that operate at all levels of the technology stack, right? Understanding that stack, getting visibility in all places, super important there, as well as using the tools and using AI itself. Now, that manifests itself in a number of ways, but one of those is, interaction with the data from a natural language perspective, bringing your business context, the technology stack, and the assets that we understand, but then having some knowledge of your business objectives. And there's an example on the screen here, free up spend for innovation. What could I do? I've interacted with some of these tools that we have. What can I spend my time most efficiently on? I have 2 hours today. Where should I focus my time in reducing cost in this particular application because I've seen spikes? Those kind of questions where your business context and your business objectives are fed in, and then the big data analyzed by these natural language and agentic AI models to get answers, that we wouldn't necessarily be able to produce ourselves. So exciting times. This, unfortunately, is a decathlon, though, not just a single race that we have to do, right? So every scope is a challenge for us to address, right? We have to bring in the data from the different scopes where you have technology spend, or we're not seeing the complete picture. And we can see here, of course, the statistics that we've seen in terms of ownership and responsibility by FinOps practitioners, and changes in the reporting lines of those teams as well. There's real acceleration of the expansion of FinOps ownership across those different scopes, and organizations bringing teams together under the same reporting line, whether that's a collaboration or a convergence of those teams, to get those kind of outcomes and understand how we can work together and get a kind of 1 + 1 = 3 outcome here. Each team, of course, has different priorities, and each scope has different needs. And so the FinOps framework, super flexible in the way that the domains and capabilities are broken down. Rate optimization doesn't make sense in the data center because we've already purchased that and there are no rate levers necessarily to pull, but it would make sense, of course, in public cloud and possibly in the SaaS space and data cloud space. Budgeting and forecasting, however, is relevant across all of those. And it's really important, to recognize and look at the tooling landscape. As a provider, Flexera covers all of the domains, all of the capabilities, and of course, all of the scopes. So you can pick and choose the things that are relevant for you at whatever stage of maturity you're in. I think Jevon mentioned the pre-crawl stage, right? A new stage that he invented during his session. These are things that we need to think about the maturity, the areas that we're operating in terms of technology spend, in order to be successful. So Flexera can help you, as I said, in all scopes, in all domains, in all capabilities with the Flexera One platform. Super powerful modular solution underpinned by this technology and intelligence platform, where the magic happens with the data layer and the normalization. And of course, we can do everything from the cloud license management side of things, which is a great segue between your ITAM and SAM persona and your FinOps public cloud teams, looking at SaaS management and the applications that you're procuring there, for AI, looking at workload optimization, be it for, Spot or data clouds, and of course, things like commitment management and automating the purchase of commitments there, as well as that core cloud cost optimization capability with sustainability data. And many of you direct customers, of course, but there's also a partner layer here that enables our partners to resell, or where they're managing, cloud and reselling cloud services, to operate, the Flexera platform in that way, where they can resell customers and do billing and invoicing for public cloud spend. So lots of opportunities, whatever your needs are. Ultimately, our objective here is to maximize the savings, right, that customers are going to achieve. So yes, we need to achieve the visibility here of all of the spend that you're consuming. And that means we can then do budgeting and allocation. We can give you that license visibility. We can lay over things like sustainability and carbon data reporting. But then the levers that we pull at rate and workload are really exciting, because they're aggregate, right? Up to 65% savings when you're using kind of discount management, and add on top of that the fact that you're not doing it yourself and you don't need an expensive SME to run that, and then start thinking about workload optimization. So stacking these things together is really important to consider. And ultimately, this is how our customers are, improving their margins, improving their profitability, and ultimately beating the competition in whatever kind of vertical and space they're operating in. All right. Well, I hope that was super useful for you. I certainly enjoyed having the opportunity to talk to you today. And we've got a few minutes now for questions. And I'll have a look in the Q&A in a minute to see what we've got there. Whilst I'm doing that, however, as I said, there's great opportunity here. And I think, Jay mentioned this as well. Scan the QR code, take advantage of this great offer to have a free cloud savings analysis, right? Really quick to do, of course, no commitment, and that's going to get you up and running super quick. And then we're going to follow up next with our live panel. So I'll be looking forward to handing you off there. I'll leave the QR code on the screen whilst I just take a couple of questions. So let me just take a look at that now on the Q&A side of things. I have a couple that have come in. One is, what is the impact of AI on your API gateway costs? That's a great question, right? Absolutely. How do we monitor that? How do we get the visibility in terms of what's happening on the API gateway? And the secret there is, well, do we ingest the data? Do we know the usage data of the gateway so that we can start to analyze that or even allocate it? Is there metadata in the API calls that tell us which applications are generating those requests? And so the impact can be, substantial. Jag, it's a great question. We can leverage AI both to monitor that and identify spikes, in the consumption, anomaly detection, if you will, against that, but only if we can obviously gather, the gateway metrics. So it's all about data ingestion and how we can do that. Happy to follow up with you offline if you wanted to. We've also got a question, implications on AI budgeting, forecasting, spend and consumption. It's a real challenge, as we've said, right? Super spiky, workloads and cost drivers going on here. But using AI can help us, right? We use AI and ML models for anomaly detection, for our forecasting models and other things. So whilst it's making the problem worse, we can also leverage those tools, as we said, using AI for FinOps to take, some control over that. Got a few minutes left and a few more questions here. Let's have a look. Is this separate solution cost apart from Flexera 1 ITAM and Flexera 1 FSOM? That's absolutely a great question. And I'll just flick back, I think, to one of the slides here so we can just talk about that. The solution is modular. So absolutely, depending on what your needs are, Deepa was asking the question here, you can procure the modules that you need at any point in time. So cloud cost optimization and the ability to support and give you visibility of AI costs is a module. There's an add-on if you wanted sustainability data, but really each of the blue boxes here, you would procure independently depending on your needs. But again, I'd really encourage you to do the kind of, the free cost analysis exercise, because many of these deliver very quick returns that ultimately could fund your investment in the other modules that you might need here. And we'll have a, Mark has kind of raised a question here. Microsoft recently suggested AI agents may require software licenses similar to employees. That's a really great question there, Mark. Obviously, that has big implications for SaaS licensing. You'll be pleased to know, however, the Flexera on platform itself is not a per seat, per user-based license. The licensing is a different approach there. So you won't see increases in costs if AI agents are necessarily impacting or interacting with the platform here. All right, some great questions there. I think we've got maybe a minute or so still to go. Let me see if I've got anything else coming in here. Ken, in your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges organizations face when making the transition from crawl to walk? That's a great question, Ken. And I think the answer for me is that organizations tend to get hung up on trying to improve the maturity of a particular capability, right? So if we thought about visibility of spend, we can spend a lot of time solving the visibility problem, particularly when we start to think about AI and we've got questions about API gateway and data at that kind of level. You're never going to complete the journey about ingesting data and getting complete visibility. And the real challenge that I see our customers having is getting bogged down in trying to solve that problem and get 100% visibility or 100% cost allocation, when the framework itself is about iteration, right? Inform, optimize, operate. Let's move around that, pretty swiftly and just drive continual improvement as we go. So really important to think about that and not just get bogged down. It's not going to be perfect the first time round, but that continual improvement exercise, I think, is a super way to think about that. We'll take one more question. I've got 40 or so seconds here, I think, before the panel. So when leveraging AI for FinOps, accuracy, hallucinations can be a concern based on the outcome, that AI produces. Again, we're super conscious about that. Having a really, accurate data layer is really important and a great advantage for us as we sit AI tools on top of that. But we're also putting in place governance and checks along the way. Happy to get into the specifics with anybody. So thanks again for your time and attention. Hopefully that was really useful. Scan the code, and I'm going to hand you over to our live panel now.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. This is Josh Fraser. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Flexera, and thank you so much for joining. First off, big shout out and thanks to Jevin for setting the stage with the macro view. Budgets are still rising by quite a bit. AI is changing the cost model, and the pressures to turn complexity into outcomes has never been higher. And it's always a pleasure to hear from Jeremy Chaplin. So Jeremy, appreciate the follow-up there and the context around the technology value era is framing, particularly the idea that we're moving from tracking spend to coaching teams to manage the value across more categories. So what we're going to do now is pivot into making it real. The next 30 minutes, I'm really, really excited to be leading a practitioner panel. And we have with us two leaders who are in the work day to day. We'll cover what's actually changing inside FinOps teams, how they build a hybrid view of spend, how they make unit economics actionable. how they show that they're approaching AI cost governance and where automation is genuinely helping versus adding to the noise. Think of this as kind of a training with champions, real people leading real teams that are actually doing the work. And we're going to hear from them, what they changed as FinOps evolved, what they wish they had done sooner, perhaps, what they're building next, so that you can get really practical advice and helpful hints in terms of how you take your own organization forward. So without further ado, I would like to invite and welcome Salami Keet. She is the head of software asset management and FinOps at FirstRand Bank. FirstRand Bank is out of South Africa, and she leads both the SAM and FinOps practice at FirstRand. So great example of FinOps kind of expanding into these new scopes and domains, which is a portfolio of integrated financial services and businesses. She'll share how they're building a hybrid view of tech spend, where ITAM, SAM, and FinOps are converging at FirstRand, and what it takes to create accountability across teams as the scope expands. And we're also joined by Eric Malartrick. He's the FinOps lead at Boomi, and Eric leads FinOps at Boomi, which is an integrated team that's helping enterprises connect apps, data, and APIs. He'll dig into how they make unit economics real at Boomi, how they're approaching AI cost governance, and where automation is actually helping their teams move faster as opposed to just adding to the noise. And we're going to focus on kind of 4 core acts here. We're going to talk a bit about expanding scope in Act 1. Then we're going to move into how we're approaching proving value out, shift into how we're governing AI spend, and then finally close things out on the changes to the operating model and automation. So Salami and Eric, welcome to the panel, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having us, Irby.
Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's dive right in. So as you heard earlier, the FinOps scope has expanded and it continues to expand. This is nothing new. Every year we're seeing FinOps take on more and more and putting more and more pressures and responsibilities on the practitioners and teams that are leading this challenge. It's a super exciting expansion. I think we can all agree with that, but it also may be somewhat daunting. It's putting a lot of pressure to change and more accountability on you all. As you heard earlier, the latest State of FinOps 2026 survey showed that 90% of FinOps teams are now managing SaaS, 64% are managing software licensing, 57% are managing private cloud, 48% are responsible for traditional data centers. So needless to say, a pretty remarkable and sizable shift in terms of expansion of scope. So I want to dig in and talk first and hear from you, Salami. So when scope started expanding at FirstRand, what was that like? What changed first? What broke first? The data or the ownership of the process? And what did you and your team do to kind of lead that shift, if you will? So Salami, over to you.
Thank you, Josh. I think for us, it wasn't so much about changing or breaking anything. Maybe if it was 3 years ago, when we were still when the FinOps processes were still really mostly cloud-based, I think then the process and certainly the data ownership would have been a bit of a mess. You had data coming from all kinds of sources, and I think if you were just to take that and you would just pull that together, that would have been a major mess. But I think what really made a difference in our organization was breaking the silos down. We already had good information in finance. We had good information in IT asset management. We have good information in FinOps. And I think what worked for us was to actually getting the ownership of the individual data and then taking those data sources together and bringing it all together in one full picture. That really made a big difference in our life. And then, of course, relating the finance, the item information, and relating that to the engineering information and the usage so that you can actually understanding your economics of the base. So that made a big difference. So if it was FinOps doing it by themselves, a lot of things would have broken. But I think it is the collaboration, and I think it is actually the working together, breaking the silos, and all teams working to proving business value of your IT spend. That was for us where the focus was. And I think as an organization, we really aimed to look at the end goal rather than focus on the politics.
Now, Salome, you of course now have direct responsibility of leading the teams for both ITAM and FinOps. I'm assuming that wasn't always the case. Where did you start? Was it FinOps and then ITAM came in, or was it the other way around? And when did that happen during this journey that you've been on at FirstRand?
So I've been looking after software asset management for the past 13 or 14 years. Don't judge my age. For a long time. About 5 years ago, but way back then, FinOps was a little bit of our portfolio in any event. Looking after the assets in the cloud was a little bit of what we were doing in any case. So when FinOps actually came together and it became a discipline, it was only natural for me to put up my hand and say, let's actually look at running FinOps and software asset management together. So it wasn't me taking over anything. It really was just us pulling it all together under a logical framework.
Wonderful. No, I appreciate you sharing a bit about that journey. Eric, how about you? What was the first practical change that happened at Boomi and within your group as the scope of FinOps started to expand in this way?
So I've been in this particular role as leading FinOps since like 2019 now. But my passion, personally has always been to find like inefficiency within resources. And it actually goes back to like probably 15 years ago, where I used to look and dig into like telco circuits and figure out like why telco circuits exist. The important piece is why. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we spending a bunch of money on a certain set of resources? For me, when I started picking up SaaS, which was many years ago, I started digging into the why we're using it in certain patterns and building the relationships, because I sit in engineering with the engineers who are using said technology. So I'll use an observability platform as an example here. So we spend a bunch of money on an observability platform, but what are we actually doing? Why are there so many logs in there? Why are there so many metrics? How are we using these metrics? Are we consuming them? Just digging, because I'm a naturally curious person, into how we are using it, and then having the conversations to figure out if like, okay, so we've got 85 users that are seldom using it. Can we drop them to a different tier and spend less for those particular sets of users? But for me, the visibility and the collaboration and the curiosity has led success for managing other things like SaaS and, of course, now AI within our particular organization.
Great. So it sounded like just this was a natural progression and just the next thing that fit very well in terms of where your mindset and how you were approaching the problem to begin with was anyway. So
yeah,
wonderful. No, I appreciate the background there. Let's move on and dive into proving value. And as we heard earlier from Jeremy, unit economics is really at the end of the day the core value measure in terms of how we look at FinOps, the impact that it's having. And as we heard from the State of the Cloud FinOps report, we had 49% of teams saying that they primarily use, so almost half, unit economics to align spend with the specific outcomes that they're delivering. Eric, let's start with you. What unit metrics actually changed decisions for you? How do you incorporate that at Boomi? And how did you get teams to trust those metrics and really orient business decisions around them as opposed to those metrics just being more vanity KPIs?
Yeah, so it is tough. There is yes, they can be vanity KPIs. I understand that. They can be pretty graphs, but really, what do they tell? For me, it's digging into, number one, what is our core platform, right? And what do we want to understand out of our core platform? For us, we like to understand what it costs for a customer to run in our environment, so the cost per customer. In order to build that up, we had to have a foundational tagging strategy that would map out different facets of our infrastructure so we could really understand what each piece costs, and then understand how many customers we currently have running through our platform. That has led to making decisions like, hey, we're potentially evaluating bringing on a customer that's going to have a longer data retention period, and they're going to consume a bunch more data. So can you help map out what the cost would be for a customer who's going to have extra usage? And because we have a unit economic of, also cost per customer and cost per gigabyte stored, that allows us to kind of extrapolate out and test whether or not this customer could come on board at the existing pricing strategy that they're currently at. So we've used it in partnership with like finance to figure out like what is a good deal and a custom deal that might make sense for customers on the sales side. That to me is like the most important part, right? Because we're in it to make money. We don't want to lose money here. So really understanding and mapping out the infrastructure is what we've done and have applied it to very interesting sales conversations.
So you've had a unit metric, in this case, cost per gigabyte stored, that has fundamentally altered the way that sales looks at and values deals, and ultimately may take the deal or not take the deal, it sounds like. Is that right?
Yeah, or make sure that the pricing structure is proper for the deal. Yeah. So that's extremely important, because otherwise you could just be saying, that's a lot of data. I don't know. No, let's not do it, right? And then it's a bad deal.
No, completely makes sense. Salome, how about you? What is that metric that you're using as a proxy at FirstRand to help generate outcomes or guide the business?
To be honest, for us, there's no single bullet. There's no one golden metric that we could have used. I think we have hundreds of different services and revenue streams that we would like to ultimately relate our costs to, right, from a unit economics point of view. That is a work in progress, to be honest. So for us, understanding at first your vCPU cost per unit, for instance, similar to what Eric is saying, understanding your SaaS license cost per user, and relating those to the other workloads, and relating those in terms of actually transactions processed, etc., etc. We try to use the most relatable unit metric to the business, and that we have found to be there's many around that we are actually utilizing. But just to give you two examples, and to track those then against similar workloads, to at least understand your efficiencies, is a good starting point before you actually get to the entire picture of what is generating that revenue. Because in large organizations, that can certainly be a challenge of enormous proportions to get all of the pieces of the pie together. So start small. Even if you start with the basics and tracking and understanding your basics, that is taking you a long end to actually get to where you eventually want to be in terms of understanding your exact revenue, your exact customer revenue per transaction, etc., etc.
Yes, that's actually a great segue. So Eric, it sounds like you may be at a little bit more advanced maturity stage at Boomi than FirstRand is this particular topic. And if our audience out there is representative of what the FinOps Foundation found in the survey, half of them are sitting there, perhaps at a lower maturity state. So what was that journey like at Boomi? How did you first identify what is that right metric to double down on? How did you get buy-in within the organization? What were the earlier stages that you went through, keeping in mind that some folks may be struggling in terms of where they might want to start?
You really have to think about how your business or how your customers are using your product, in our case, right? They are sending lots of data or using a particular, data storage facets of our application, right? So think about what's important to you. So in this case, for us, it is very much data consumption and data processing. So figuring out and mapping your infrastructure to understand where your data is processed or where your data is stored gives you the ability to have, number one, understand the cost of that. And number two, you have to be able to understand like what the throughput or the flow is going to be. So naturally speaking, if you can tie your consumption with the cost of your infrastructure, you can map out that cost per gigabyte stored or cost per gigabyte processed. But you have to really think about what's important to your business and what you want to measure. Just looking at, cost per customer may show you, what an average customer costs, but does that really show the little ones versus the big ones, right? It's just kind of making it an average basis.
And when you went through that process, who did you work in close partnership with? Was this something that was really championed by the FinOps team? Was this in partnership with finance, engineering, sales, perhaps, product? Where were
And
your key
quite frankly, it was
stakeholders?
me. It was me understanding
Yeah.
and growing my FinOps practice that I've built. One of the
Mhm.
things that is common, as we know from the survey, is unit economics are important. So I really wanted to get out ahead of that years ago and figure out, like, hey, part of our product is, launches for a particular product. Part of it is golden records that we have. So understanding, like, because I knew where the costs were, but I didn't understand like the volumes and where to get the volumes from. So I built a partnership with like product and finance to figure out where the consumption data was and just married the two together. So
Got it. No, good stuff. Good stuff. Let's move on to the topic du jour here. Governing AI spend. Of course, on everyone's minds. You heard loud and clear in the State of FinOps report. 98% of FinOps practitioners are focused on managing AI spend. First off, I'd love to meet the 2% that are not. So if you're on the call today, please put forth a comment there so we can talk to you. We'll pull you live on the stage. But all jokes aside, let's talk about that. So, Eric, let's start with you. As FinOps moves into AI more aggressively here, and as AI spend continues to increase, and the platforms and tools and things that are in use, and organizations are more and more putting pressure on their stakeholders to adopt AI, help us understand what you're doing to provide visibility and ownership around the cost side of AI without stifling the innovation, the adoption pressure that your stakeholders that you serve are clearly under.
yeah, number one was establishing core visibility for AI, right? We consume multiple AI applications within our environment. We use multiple coding assistants and all that fun stuff. But having like a single pane of glass was pretty important to be able to understand like where we're trending. But number two, in working with engineers, I sit in engineering, and I've been working with them on establishing a coding assistant and really getting the word out on how to measure consumption in this pay-as-you-go token-based economy is real important. You got to be able to have the data back to the engineer so they can understand how they are consuming. So as we started rolling out, it was very important, as per a training and as per education and recorded sessions, to make sure that engineers were able to see the data in near real time as they are consuming. So we've built that mentality and culture right from the beginning as we ramp up the usage for these particular coding assistants.
Did that roll out in conjunction with the adoption, like the governance and visibility, or did it come later?
It rolled out with the adoption. So we did it as part of the project of adopting new AI coding assistants.
Got it. Okay. Salome, at First Rand, as you're getting more aggressive with AI, what guardrails are set up there, and how did that happen?
A very similar process on our side. We focused and are focusing a lot of attention on the control environment and understanding who's using what and where. I think that is the first major thing that we were working on, and as we are rolling out, that we're just making sure that those governance processes of understanding your data is very clearly defined. But I think another piece where we are also using a lot of and spending a lot of time is exactly as Eric is saying, is guiding and training our engineers to make sure that we don't use please and thank you in our hero prompts, for instance. A lot has been said about that. I'm saying that tongue in the cheek, but using AI effectively, prompting effectively. What does good look like? So for us, FinOps isn't a policeman. We're not a policeman. We are guidance. We are guardrails. We are influence. We are enablers. And that is where we are focusing on to try and assist the guys, because everybody knows that cost is a major factor, right? So it's really about enabling the people to understand their own costs and enabling them to actually look at ensuring that when they are coding as efficiently. When we are looking at GPUs, we are at least making sure that it's right-sized, etc.
When you both first encountered these stakeholder groups around that education journey, where did you find they were at? Did they basically understand the broad stroke concepts and how consumption based and token based was different, or was this more of a foreign concept that you had to really start from scratch in terms of helping them understand the economic model behind these AI based solutions?
Look, sorry, are you speaking to Eric? Apologies, Eric.
Yeah, both of you, please. But Eric, let's start with you.
Yeah, so tokens are a foreign concept to engineers. I mean, up until, I don't know, call it a year, 2 years ago, right? And usually, like, the goal of FinOps was to connect engineers to the dollars being spent. But now you're being connected to tokens, which have an abstract value, right? They're different depending on what model you're using. So it further abstracts the engineer to the dollar, which I find it being, kind of annoying. But the other thing is, even if you drop token prices, which we've seen, it actually might be more expensive because the context windows are bigger and you can use more faster depending on which model and coding assistant you're using. So you could end up spending a ton more money, even though it's actually cheaper, which is brilliant out there in terms of forecasting and budgeting. But at the end of the day, like, having the conversations with the engineers from the beginning, talking about visibility, and then talking with them about best practices about how to use this particular coding assistant has helped in a concert way of rolling it out to the rest of the organization, because engineering, the actual core engineers are using it and sharing how the best practices, of how to actually use the software, and myself is using or providing information on how to track the visibility. So it's worked pretty well, but we're still early in this journey. We're crawling, but I can say that, like, spend has doubled month over month, and it's continuing to trend that way. So it's starting to get significant.
Right. Salome, how about you? What was the level of awareness and education journey when you first started here?
We've got front runners that actually has quite a bit of maturity and have been in the game, and we have people that is not so clued up, right? So I think we have pockets of better and pockets of lesser maturity, but I think it's, as Eric is saying, for us as well. This is a crawling game at this stage, and we are all learning together. I think the front runners are helping. And they're helping a lot. And but I think in terms of getting to where we actually want to be in terms of FinOps with AI, being able to actually say, has it reduced your time to market, for instance, etc. Getting to those kind of things is still going to be some time off until we can actually get to the actual nuts and bolts of the business value of it.
Yeah, and Salome, we talked a lot about the interaction with engineers and developers, but same question, but geared towards core stakeholder groups, particularly in this case procurement and finance. What are you finding there? What were the expectations, and what's that journey been like?
I must say, I think our finance and procurement people are really right on track in terms of the AI journey at this stage. They are very supportive. There's a lot of curiosity, and we are finding that finance is dabbling in their own AI at the moment. I mean, this is actually, we are seeing really lots of excitement across the organization. In terms of spend, of course, that is something that we are really tracking very, very closely with finance, with procurement, and pulling all of their data sources together, exactly as Eric was saying, is a big focus for us to just make sure that while everybody is so excited about this, and while this is a growing phenomenon, that we actually just make sure that we keep tabs on the cost and that we're not duplicating. Effort.
And that's it. And Eric, I assume similar on your end, you're interacting heavily with finance and procurement.
Yes, it is a must. From a procurement perspective, we want to make sure we're getting the best deal, and from a finance perspective, we want to make sure we're directionally accurate, not blowing through budgets. And eventually, we have plans of having something like token budgets and all that, but that is further when we're actually like walking.
Yeah. It's an interesting segue into our final act here, which is how we take all this and create operating models that can scale. And although neither of you specifically stated it, it certainly was implied that it sounds like the organization was very much looking to you and your teams to lead the way here and to be the experts. Yes, we're all learning, but they immediately started turning to the FinOps groups within the respective orgs to provide some answers here. Which I think is great. And it's also a great opportunity for everyone in the audience. So on the notion of scale, 81% of respondents in the FinOps survey noted that, they operate with a centralized enablement or hub and spoke execution. So basically, you're the center of it all. You're the one that's expected to provide these answers to guide the organization. So what kind of strategies have you systematized and what kind of areas have you focused on that can help kind of guide the AI adoption, but do it in a responsible way where you can optimize what you're consuming and provide that needed visibility and guardrails, but still provide that kind of, human judgment, if you will, to it all, so it stays in control. Salome, let's start with you. What's going on there that's helping kind of accelerate, but do it responsibly and scale?
So I think obviously the first one is data, and data needs to be as automated as possible. So your data platform is your first one, and I think that goes without saying. The second portion of what we are focusing on to automate is actions, low-hanging fruit. So right-sizing actions that are not, for instance, taking a GP2 to a GP3 in your AWS world from an EBS storage point of view, things that is a very small, that really can make a monetary difference, but really doesn't have a big impact. Automate as much of those things as possible, terminating your idle instances, etc. Matters like that. I think your last one is your process actions, and that is where you can't necessarily automate it. And this is where perhaps you get an anomaly in a production environment. You can't necessarily automate the resolution of it, but you can certainly automate the process of getting the resolution. Automate your strategy via your FinOps tool to actually getting the service tickets raised, etc., so that your process of actually getting to the actions is as smooth and as streamlined as possible. So those are really the three pieces that we are focusing on. Your human will always, where there's a potential for loss, you still need your human judgment, but low risk and data, automate as far as possible. That was what we are focusing on.
And is it safe to say that the core is to drive adoption as efficiently and as automated as possible right now versus, make it as efficient financially as possible? Is that
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
100%.
Oh, good. Yeah, good stuff. Eric, how about you? When you think about automation and how you're, accelerating adoption, but doing it in a responsible way, where are you guys adopting techniques to scale here?
Well, you made a savvy acquisition not too long ago where you purchased ProsperOps. I have been using ProsperOps for a very long time, probably 4.5 4 years, I think, to this month.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. It has made a significant difference in my life where I don't even really think about commitment management anymore. So, that's been removed from my brain. While I just hand it off to ProsperOps to take care of. The second piece is we have started installing like efficiency hammers, I'll call it, within sandboxes where we have some governance where if you are not using CPU, as in if you're routinely under 30%, you're going to get a ticket into your queue, you're going to be communicated with, and eventually, if you take no action, that resource is going to get turned off. So, starting to drive efficiency, especially in the non-production environments, automatically without intervention from us has helped.
When you think about those efficiency hammers, love that term, by the way, and tie that back to what you mentioned earlier about tokens and, we'll call it the sneakiness of or the power of the model if you're one of these vendors in terms of, how they change the context that they're applied to and whatnot. Where do you see those hammers being able to be deployed, for lack of a better way of putting it, and the token and consumption-based approach that we're seeing more and more from these vendors.
And so there's number one, using those tools, I'll call them AI agents, to investigate for you. Like one of the things we're working on here is to have basically an AI agent that will see an anomaly that comes in, and it will have the context and understanding and access to be able to see, okay, here's exactly what was changed within AWS, and have access to something like Jira, where it will see the change request that was put in. So kind of tie back an anomaly to a person, to a change like that, right? And that's normally like investigating anomalies takes some time. So that's one thing that we're looking to implement. We already have, a working concept of it. Number two is for efficiency on the AI side. It's really digging in and understanding how the engineers are using. Like, are you, looping context over and over again, which is causing the cost to go up? Or are you, working on a really big project where you've, established a testing framework for your new application that you've built, right? So we're still figuring that, efficiency piece out on the AI side, but for using it, yes, we're already there.
Wonderful. I want to pivot to the Q&A here. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I want to make sure we get a few questions, but I'll leave you just one other question. I'm curious in terms of how your organizations are thinking about overall people costs. There was an article, I think it was in the Journal not too long ago, where looking at the cost of an engineer, fully loaded cost of an engineer, you have, of course, the salary and bonus, et cetera, overhead, healthcare, so on and so forth. But now they're adding in, hey, an expected 50% of the total OTE, is going to come from AI consumption-based costs. Have either of your organizations started looking at the fully loaded cost of a developer in that context? Eric, start with you.
Well, says the guy who is, selling and creating these GPUs, right? 50% of that. We're roughly starting to look at like token consumption per person, but it's not a priority right now. Maybe one day it will be. I've have been thinking about that, especially when it comes to like lower cost regions, and how, if somebody is consuming a ton of, Claude or whatever in a low cost region, does that kind of defeat the purpose? So I don't know, have no preference or opinion on that, but certainly something to think about for the future.
Salome, anything going over at First Rand in that regards?
Same for us. Same for us. Right now, we're focusing our effort on getting efficient in AI. We are very, very interesting topic to put in our parking lot, but we are not there yet.
Yeah, there's plenty to tackle. We don't need to add yet another thing. So good stuff. So let's get to some questions here. And as a reminder to the audience, feel free to post a question in the Q&A chat there, and we'll get to as many as we can here live. One I wanted to start with, we've been leaning a lot towards, or heavily in this conversation towards, pure plays, the Anthropics of the world and whatnot. How are you thinking about more traditional SaaS suites, like take a O365 as Copilot becomes a larger and larger share of that overall spend pie? How do you think about that particular segment of vendors when you think about all the AI adoption and governance that you just mentioned? Salome, let's start with you there. Any thoughts?
So for us at the moment, something like Copilot and Office 365, we are very much targeting specific individuals for utilization where it's Copilot. We have a large organization. A lot of people are, for instance, tellers, things like that. So it isn't something that we roll out across our environment, because there wouldn't necessarily at this stage be a return on investment for somebody that is actually client-facing, right? That may change in the future, but so we are very specific in terms of managing who we are giving AI and suites to versus our entire Office 365 estate. Josh.
Got it. Eric, how about it, Boomi? Any thoughts there?
So for like use for seat-based licenses and all that, like we've built tools that will go out and evaluate who is using or who is not using. And if they're not using, their licenses will be pulled like automatically. If they want it back, of course, later they can certainly ask for it back. But we've looked at it, kind of taken a technology approach to it, where it'll automatically remove and re-add and all those things. But yeah.
During the procurement process, and of course, all this is putting a lot of pressure on procurement professionals as they, work on and negotiating these deals. What are you seeing in terms of their level of focus on not only understanding the portion of these traditional vendors that are, adopting the cost portion that are coming from, more and more consumption-based, AI-driven services that are part of the suite, and also what questions are you finding they're asking you and your teams in terms of what they should be concerned about, what they should be pushing for during those negotiations?
Value.
Eric, can I start with you?
I'm not a huge fan of like the seat-based licenses, although they're easier to predict. But I think my own personal opinion in the near future or not so distant future is we're probably going to be moving into a world of value-based pricing. So you pay for the value that you're getting out of said tool. We'll see if my own personal opinion transpires into reality, but that's certainly one question I'd like to ask vendors. What is the value that we're getting out of this solution that we're paying for?
Yeah, and you mentioned ProsperOps. First off, thank you for the compliments there, both on the acquisition, and we love hearing how satisfied our customers are with that solution. It's been a great addition to the Flexera portfolio. For those not familiar in the audience, ProsperOps' pricing model is a percentage of the value that's delivered in the form of savings on commitment managements. But when that first entered the organization, when you guys first adopted that, what was that conversation like? Was there skepticism or lack of trust as to how would this actually be calculated? How can we assure that that value really is what they say it is? What was that like, if you can think back 3 years? Because I'm imagining that what you just described is probably easier said than done in a lot of these organizations of really trusting and having the transparency from the vendors that they can, accurately predict and feel confident about these value-based pricing metrics.
Yeah, it was definitely a question at the time. And yeah, we're going back 4 years now. So yeah, really understanding and, hoping that they can deliver exactly what they say they can deliver. That was the biggest piece, in our brain as we were negotiating this contract. And I had some good references from people at the time who were using it. So that helped quite a bit in terms of, yes, they do what they say they will do. And I was able to take the, more or less the assessment that it showed and, showcased how much money it was going to be saving us on top of what I was already doing. And I was able to shop that around and compare it to multiple vendors, of course, at the time. And at the end of the day, we chose to go with this particular platform. It was a great decision, an amazing decision, right? Multiple millions of dollars later in savings, over the course of many years. It's certainly held its value and it did what it said it was going to do.
Wonderful. Well, we plan to continue and then some. Salome, how about on your end? What is procurement asking you for as it relates to arming them from a negotiating standpoint? Do you have an equivalent, on the first RAND side in terms of value-based metrics and pricing models that you're adopting with certain vendors?
They are certainly asking about value and what are we actually gonna get out of it. But we are lucky in terms of our procurement team is very much in lockstep with our IT asset management and our FinOps team. So, we are trying to enable them with as much as information and how it works so that, when we negotiate effectively. So I think for us, it is really enabling, using our data to enable procurement to ask the right questions as well. And just keeping them in lockstep with us. That is what really is working from our end. Value-based, yes, we certainly want to get there. But I think in terms of being able to even explain the value that Copilot is giving it to an organization in rands and cents or in dollars or in whatever currency you are working in is something that we all would still love to see. But we're working, obviously, that would be great.
And do you view that as your team's responsibility to kind of lead that effort, or are are you an equal partner with the folks that are actually using the technology, be it in development or product engineering?
So for us, we are always an enabler. I think that's maybe the politically correct answer as well. Yet we like to enable, to guide, and be part of the solution, right? But no, FinOps and IT asset management can never do it on its own, right? So yes, we may lead, but it is always in collaboration with our teams.
Mhm.
Eric, how about you? Where do you see your role and your team's role being in this value-based journey with additional vendors and AI?
Also an enabler. I agree with everything that you said, Salome. We need to really partner up with the teams so they can understand, consumption models and the right questions to ask. But more importantly, what the value is of said solution that we're looking to buy or procure. Like, that is the most important piece. And it's, it shows why, people like myself and my teammate exist, because we're really good at understanding value.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to hear from both of you before we wrap things up. What keeps you up at night? Things have changed pretty dramatically. I'm sure many things. Let's focus on the professional things that keep you up at night. But when you think about how fast this is all changing, the slope of the curve, the expanding scope, what keeps you up at night as a leader of FinOps and as a key responsible party to make sure that we have fast but yet governed and efficient adoption of AI technology? So Eric, let's start with you.
For me, it's the rapid growth this year of AI consumption. I haven't seen it to this point, but now that it's started, it's growing faster than I expected. And I'm worrying that the plan that we've set forth may need to be readjusted in a different way if we want to continue to see the value that we're getting from these AI tools. So yeah, definitely a thought in my mind.
Okay, so the pace, in other words, the pace of adoption and presumably the resulting cost is going to outpace the value justification, and that will undoubtedly lead to some tough conversations and decisions internally at the organization. Okay.
Right. If we want to continue using at a certain pace, then it's going to cost more.
Yeah. Salome, how about you? What keeps you up at night?
And of course, when it costs more, how are you going to improve that value? Exactly, Eric. So I think that is exactly also from my side. But the other piece is, how can I use AI more effectively in my own operation? I think that is the other thing that I'm dreaming dreams about is, surely it is a game changer for FinOps and for IT asset management as well. And how can we do it better and faster ourselves? I think that's the other piece.
And I think within that statement, I'm sure competition comes into mind there as well. I mean, part of this fast adoption is the need to keep pace with those that you compete with out in the marketplace. But well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Eric and Salome. Thank you so much. Really, really fascinating insights. It's always a pleasure and always a privilege to be able to hear directly from the people doing this. So we thank you again for your time and joining the group. And with that, we're going to turn things back over here, and we're going to hear from Steve Trask, who's going to bring us home and talk about the state of FinOps and some kind of key customer stories and a key keynote to end today's session. So thank you again for joining, everyone. And with that, we'll say our goodbyes. Thanks, all.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a great summit. Thanks very much for joining. Some great insights there from the panel. My name's Steve Trask. I'm COO of the FinOps Foundation, and I'm here to kind of cover the State of FinOps Report 2026 with you. The FinOps Foundation is a non-profit organization dedicated to advancing the people who manage the value of technology. It's a free-to-join organization. You can just go to finops.org and take part and join the community. This year, we have segments on the size of organization, Popular industries that took part. Regional coverage, slightly different for last year, is kind of with an increase in respondents from Europe and Asia. This is a good snapshot of our community as a whole. Respondents represent 83 billion plus in cloud spend, and I would say more because not everyone can share that information. And it also doesn't include areas such as SaaS, data centers, licensing, and all the different technologies included in the organization. New to this year's report, we're also conducted interviews with practitioners and the community and integrated viewpoints from executives as well. So I won't hold back. Let's dive in and kind of get started. So looking at reporting and team structure, the vast majority are reporting to CIO and CTO, aligning with previous data we collected. We combine these together as insights show that these roles are really interlinked, often one reporting to the other, depending on the organization size or type or structure. This CTO-CIO segment has increased 18% since 2023, showing that continued consolidation around this area. While the reporting line to the CFO shows a 6% decline. So it's really kind of like the mainstay where the most FinOps teams and practices kind of report. Team structures are around enabling centrally, and another version being hub and spoke, both equating to 81% in total. Those with hub and spoke structures are mainly from larger enterprises, those 10,000 plus organizations. There is also 10% doing FinOps activities while not having a defined team in their organizations. You don't need a team to do FinOps. This is aligned to those with lower technology spends. Typically, it starts with evolving with like a part-time person, typically with an engineering side, who starts taking on that cloud cost management, especially when the technology categories grow, it suddenly kind of expands out, and then you need to make those full-time employees and then build out the team from there. But as costs rapidly rise, some people kind of bring in a team straight away. I want to bring a real world example. This is from a financial institution, team structure, obviously a multinational, very large. And you can see how kind of like the FinOps team is actually kind of aligned to the IT COO, which reports to the CIO, group CIO, then goes up to the CEO. So team size, we're talking about team size and how big teams are. We have not gathered data on this for a few years, and it shows teams are running slightly leaner than previously found. Those managing 15 to 100 million in annual public cloud spend, having an average of 3 practitioners on 1 contractor service provider. However, this data is really, really hard to pin down. It really is dependent on the organization, the spend, and it does vary a lot. And it does also considerations of what partnerships and service providers have you got in the mix. But it does kind of depend on your individual organization and part-time support and what technology areas do you cover and what skills do you have. So it really is down to the fabric of your organization. This is just a guide, I would say. When asked about what skill sets are you looking to add in the next 12 months, AI cost management is clear top desired skill, followed by tooling, engineering, automation, capacity planning, forecasting. It's interesting to know all of these are very technical skills and several engineering based. No matter the size of the team, all have AI cost management as the most required skill set in the next 12 months. However, the notable differences across annual high spend brackets are high requirements for engineering and automation development skills more than others. So just to kind of give again another real world example from another financial services company, having an existing team that has those kind of like key kind of common personas, they're looking to add those skills, those AI skills, those SREs, the sustainability actually coming in, the data scientist. Data is becoming a more important persona as well within FinOps, especially with the evolution of AI. So it shows you how these team is evolving and growing to add these different skill sets, what they're looking to build in, but also kind of like how do they kind of partner with the organization. You're typically going with leadership, finance, product, engineering, but now it's kind of like on-prem data center teams, SaaS, enterprise architecture, technology strategy. So it's also expanding across the business as kind of different technology categories come under the remit of the FinOps team as well, and working with those partners. So it really is kind of expanding, adding skills, and adding kind of like the expansion across the organization of who they interact with. So, organizational alignment, collaboration between teams. We talked around SAM there. Teams are continuing to the increasing trend from previous years of collaboration, often with ITFM and ITAM and ITSM, have the largest year-on-year rise in collaboration. For team integrations, it's also increased across all areas shown, with ITFM having the largest year-on-year increase, adding 6 percentage points. We saw that increased collaboration was most likely at large enterprises, and then team integrations more likely at SMBs, probably around kind of friction to be able to actually get those processes aligned quickly is much easier at a small organization, where a larger organization keep the same models but bring in the collaboration tighter. Also noting the rise in sustainability ESG teams collaboration and integration. This aligns with more European respondents, but did not mean an increase in priority, which we'll cover soon. We're also hearing platform engineering is another area that requires collaboration that we definitely need to go into more. So this is the current priorities. Optimization is top, the same as last year, and is likely really to remain the focus for practitioners, especially for those managing additional technology categories, which itself rises 6 places to second compared to last year. From interviews, we heard increasingly optimization efforts are funding AI initiatives. We need to be more efficient with our technology to free up resources and funds to kind of put into those AI projects. Interestingly, those who are not prioritizing optimization of workloads outnumbered those who selected it as a priority. Their responses were just more dispersed across that longer tail of options. However, they are prioritizing applying FinOps to more areas of spend, FinOps for AI, and governance at scale. That's where they're really kind of focusing. It is worth noticing reporting on cloud carbon, which we mentioned the ESG kind of link there before. And staffing still persists as the lowest priority. Reporting on cloud carbon actually decreased 4 percentage points year on year, even though respondents from Europe increased. This is not saying the work is not being done. It's just currently not being prioritized against other activities. They can still be doing it. It could be it's just happening as a day-to-day, and it's a straightforward process. It's just not increasing as a priority for them. This is a quote from one of our interviews showing the rising trend we are finding amongst the more mature practices, demonstrating optimization opportunities on public cloud are smaller and potentially more time consuming for less return, leading to more automation. And that's where we're seeing that those desired skills, those kind of like building out developing those automations. This also aligns with managing additional technology spend, as opportunities might have more impact. There's more greenfield there to kind of go after. Again, this is all about how mature your practice is. Less mature practices, if you've only just started adopting FinOps, that's okay. You've just got to start where you are. And there's a lot more opportunity potentially in the public cloud space. But with the more mature people, more mature practices that have been doing this a long time, the low-hanging fruit is gone, and they need to kind of like be more efficient within themselves and find those, if they're being tasked to find those optimizations, are looking slightly further afield into those different technology categories. So these are the future priorities. What are folks planning to work on in the next 12 months? The biggest increase is FinOps for AI, taking the top spot, moving up 6 places quite dramatically, with an additional 13 percentage points. Also, AI for FinOps moves up significantly, which may relate to staffing and acquiring talent that also drops to last. Applying FinOps to additional technology areas remains at number 2. It's really kind of like poignant, because to persistently stay there over current priorities and future priorities really means it's kind of like embedded as a key function and priority for practitioners. And defining unit economics jumps 5 places. We do see, anecdotally, a kind of connection between those selecting FinOps for AI and unit economics throughout the data in the report. There's that combination typically kind of shows up in multiple places. So digging into the areas of additional technology spend being managed today in the next 12 months, which is the second highest priority, if you remember, from the current and future, which is very telling. Planned increases in SaaS have actually materialized from last year and continue on the same trend with rising to 90%. Other areas have seen increases, demonstrating why it's such a high priority for respondents and consistently is so. It's worth noting nearly half are managing or planning to manage data center spend this year, which is interesting. It's kind of like this expansion across technology categories is kind of quicker than I personally thought it would be, but it actually really resonates that people are looking further afield to bring these all together. It's also worth noting that 16% are managing labor today and 12% are planning to in the next 12 months. This was actually a hot topic within a conversation with a group of advanced practitioners with a portion already kind of managing labor costs now, relating it to like, if you're going to manage data center costs, you need to be kind of including labor costs as part of that total cost. But also kind of like comparing it with labor costs with certain AI efforts. It's like if we're investing in AI or investing in staff, and that technology and people kind of balance is shifting within organizations at the moment. But other people are wanting to do it, but they need access to the data. They need to kind of be able to kind of get that staffing data in there and labor data in there. So it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. So if we double click on the SaaS spend area, what does that mean and how people are doing that? Data cloud platforms is the most popular area, along with observability. I mean, data cloud platforms is very cloud-like. I would say it's the closest spend in technology of the SaaS spend. But AI services are making an impact. You can see that they're the biggest planned increase in the next year. From interviews, SaaS is seen as an important area, potential optimizations with leadership driving the mandate for this. They're asking the FinOps teams to kind of like, what can they do and support potentially with an ITAM team in collaboration and kind of like optimize within the SaaS area. But others have stated actually they're being proactive about it. They're leaning it into themselves. They're not waiting for a mandate. They're actually seeing the opportunity of how they can improve efficiency within their technology spend for their organization. Another key point here is 8% are currently managing all these types of SaaS. And that rises to 12, expected to manage this in the next 12 months. But it does highlight there's so much room for growth within this SaaS technology spend area. We're getting, SaaS is changing dramatically. It's bringing in AI features. It's kind of, lots of areas of the business have the ability to procure SaaS as well. So there's a lot of ability to expand within all these areas of management for SaaS. So I think we're just at the beginning. A lot of people are managing some form of SaaS. Are they going to be managing kind of different areas of SaaS, the more business kind of SaaS? I think that's going to be interesting of how that develops. So I added this slide in because there's an interesting aspect. Software is becoming more cloud-like. I mentioned kind of like data cloud platforms are kind of the most cloud-like pricing model, but we're seeing this change where spend across technology categories is becoming more variable, more volatile. If it's managed like a fixed one-off cost, it creates risk because if you just manage it once, it's continuously changing. It's continuously kind of like updating. Cloud is not just one change like infrastructure. It changing. It changed the timing of cost, and it links back to economic signals. The risk being raised too late. You've got to monitor these continuously to be able to do this. And we're seeing this change of pricing models across the different technology categories. Each technology category works differently. Pricing and risk models are getting more blurred as ecosystems get more complex. public cloud has commitments, on-demand overages, marketplace spend. It could go through marketplace. SaaS has base subscriptions, usage tiers, overages, especially within AI features. You pay on consumption for those additional AI features within SaaS. Licenses have entitlements plus consumption-based scaling. Data clouds have virtual currencies, integration cost drivers, marketplace add-ons. AI, you might have reserve capacity, token-based usage. So there's lots of complexity. It's just that change that consumption-based pricing models are increasing, especially across in the SaaS space. And that's driving that need to manage that more closely, more granular, there's more data available. And this is the part that's driving that expansion of technology categories for the FinOps teams. So when we looked at the capabilities in the state of FinOps that practitioners are applying to the different areas of spend, there were notable differences to 2025 when budgeting and forecasting was top. Allocation is top across all areas. This could be in relation to data being less available for certain technology categories compared to public cloud, but there's still from the understanding usage and cost domain. So there's still a lot of, we want to kind of understand it, allocate it, get that visibility for it. Another change from last year is how optimization and tools and services are appearing now. As maturity develops, folks are progressing from that understanding, visibility, allocating it to optimizing efforts, and also looking at how can it be done more effectively with tooling and services, especially look at the team size. How do we be more productive? How can they utilize tooling to solve some of these capabilities and challenges around these different technology categories? So managing AI spend, it's become the norm for FinOps practices. We predicted it last year. We don't typically predict, but we did forecast that. The continued AI investment, we see the rise in the need to manage this area, especially how quickly it's doing. You can see it's kind of increased from 2024, 31% to 2026, 98%. It is so quickly come into this space. From interviews and conversations, it is just a new technology type for practitioners in some ways to deal with. But also there are a lot of challenges that come with it because there's a lot of differences with it. So we asked around the challenges within this area, and there was 3 predominant challenges practitioners are facing when applying FinOps to the AI spend. Understanding the full scope of AI spending. There could be new areas of the business using AI they're unaware of. Especially within the SaaS areas, kind of HR or marketing might be utilizing things where it's utilizing AI on a consumption basis that they're just spending. Quantifying the value for that spend seems to be a persistent challenge with AI. How can, they're testing the use cases. Sometimes AI projects can be more kind of like science than engineering, and it's kind of like, are they developing it with cost in mind, that shift left mentality? Are they thinking about what models they're using early on, or are they just proving out the use case and then finding, that quantifying that value is harder because the underlying costs? And then allocating the spend. How do you kind of allocate something that's been used by different areas of the business or split across different kind of products itself? It'll be interesting to see how these challenges persist in the coming years. It's definitely a hot topic within the community, and how we kind of build best practices around this. There's been a lot of work around that recently, and go to the website and check out some of the resources. But the start in overcoming these challenges, but it's an organizational challenge as well of how to quantify that value for the end customer and organization as a whole. So planned investments in AI, it remains strong, heavy investments still in public cloud, along with increases in SaaS. This includes AI services and also increases in data center and private cloud. So it has no signs of stopping. It is kind of here to stay. A notable point from the interviews highlighted on this slide is the level of spend management and processes varies as a number shared how the focus is on speed and innovation versus the cost and value. What's the cost for not developing features in AI? What's the cost in not investing a certain amount as an organization? So they're trying to kind of like be ready to have a stronger governance, but a lot of people were saying that speed and innovation is the priority for them at the moment. We do expect that to switch at some point, but it has no signs of slowing down at the moment. Now switching to AI for FinOps, how important is using AI for your FinOps practice? When we did the survey, almost half said it was of high importance and only 19% consider it low importance. Those who deem it higher importance typically are in the large enterprise organizations. Practitioners stated use cases such as like tagging and smaller optimization opportunities and automated remediations, even in the cloud native aspects and even in the free tooling, build out forecasts. It really is going to impact more and more over the next 12 months. This is a really rising topic within the community itself as well. The context files for the governance for AI to put into. So there's lots to do in that area. I will touch on tooling. We do not ask any specific tooling questions as we do not rank or recommend tooling. That is for the analysts to do. We asked what FinOps tool features or capabilities would you like to see that do not exist today? This is a free-form response, so we analyzed and grouped all the information. The top three in order were granular monitoring of AI spend, around tokens, LLM requests, GPU utilization. It goes with all the trend throughout the report is AI is coming top in multiple areas. Pre-deployment costings that relate to that enabling shift left. How do we get costs in front of kind of like the engineer, but even potentially further, how do we get that cost kind of modeling at that business case stage? But that's definitely a kind of an interest area. And then giving a single pane of glass to show the spend across different technology categories as practitioners are looking to their remit being widened and including different technology categories because AI uses different technologies and it's just the mix of an organization. How can they get that into a single pane of glass and manage their SaaS costs and their cloud costs and do those trade-off decisions? These align with the priorities, and how AI's kind of spend is impacting all areas, including tooling. Other notable groupings included automation, relating to productivity, unit economics, again, as a rising priority that was focus adoption, managing software licenses, and granular shared cost container allocation. So it's interesting, the tooling space and how AI is going to be coming into this, but how the priorities are, the features people are looking for aligning to those priorities, and having the support from the tooling to be more productive. So when asking respondents, what level of technology selection does FinOps influence? If we cross-referenced it with the level in the organization that enabled with FinOps data, we found those enabling at the VP, SVP plus levels have much more influence over technology selection than those enabling the director level with FinOps data. This shows the real importance of enabling at higher levels, building a FinOps culture in the organization to gain influence and drive more value and overall success of the FinOps practice. This is not just which service should we use for this influence. It's a kind of like which cloud should we use, or should we putting this into the data center, or do we have a minimum revenue commit to a certain provider that we need to put this into, or is SaaS gonna fill this space? It's about that influence to kind of like inform people of the most efficient way to deploy that application or kind of like the placement of that workload. This also relates to the roles that we're now seeing at the higher levels above the FinOps team, utilizing that data for the broader strategic technology decisions. When those large organizations have done large contract with technology providers, the FinOps team is providing the data to provide the context that feed into those kind of decisions through the layers of the organization. Again, it's a cultural discipline which kind of now includes a strong leadership tie. So moving on to focus, we are seeing an increase in those who are obtaining focus formatted billing data. This is likely to continued improvements in the specification for practitioner use cases and the growing ecosystem of data generators. There's even more that came out last week. We are also hearing FinOps platforms and tools integrating it in as a focus is a complementary tool for platforms as well. It's an easier way to kind of unify those costs and talk about those costs as a whole. Practitioners are looking for focus support in additional areas like Microsoft 365 is a top request again. Likely some of these are driven by persistent challenges or growing investments. And this connects to demand for unified billing, visibility across technologies, as shown in the tooling slide. People really want to kind of like see this all together. There is also a long tail of additional requests that people are looking to kind of bring their data in, and this is changing, I would say, monthly. There's more data providers coming in to support the project. The AI narrative continues, where practitioners would like to see focus expand to be with being the top request, supported, followed by data center. There are subtle differences between cloud spend levels here, with those spending $100 million plus in cloud spend wanted extra support for data center costs, more, and then more support for AI workloads. The team is already developing assets around these areas, and of course, all this information feeds into the focus project itself. AI dominates the agenda. Utilizing AI for FinOps is obviously an increasing aspect as well. FinOps has expanded across technology categories, especially SaaS. Optimization is table stakes. It's just something teams do. It's kind of like mature practices are really focusing on the area of value, and that's that shifting up because it enables higher levels in the organization, has more influence in technology choice. So it does really kind of like inform that cultural kind of decision making up in the organization. Shift left is happening. It's a highly desired feature within tooling, but there's still challenges within that. Intersecting disciplines are converging. The trend we've seen in the last 3 years, further collaboration, especially with ITFM or ITAM at larger enterprises, collaborate. Smaller teams, smaller organizations, they integrate. Teams are small and lean. FinOps is primarily enabled centrally, but with embedded champions, especially at larger enterprises. Remember, FinOps is everyone's job. Okay, thank you very much for kind of like hearing me on all those lots of data points on there. The full report is available at data.finops.org. You can go read it all. You can kind of click through and kind of like filter things on charts and things and get to the aspects you're looking for. Happy to kind of like share any insights. If you're looking for anything particular, please feel free to reach out directly. Also, I will get a mention in. We have our FinOps X annual conference in San Diego coming up. If you want to dive deeper, if you want to meet the 2,500 attendees that's going to be talking about this and developing the best practices, we'd love to have you there. We'd love to see you there. Just go to finops.org and you can find the link to FinOps X and all the details there. The agenda is there. Excited to have Flexera as a sponsor as well, and all the team going to be present to be there. Okay, thank you for listening. Thank you for having me here, and I'm going to hand it back to Jay. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I want to say thank you to the speakers and panelists today for joining us and their active participation. It's clear that AI is top of mind, and we should expect that to continue for quite some time, given the rate of change happening in this sector. It's also clear that the days of FinOps being narrowly focused on just public cloud are long behind us, and it's now a much broader scope focused on technology value. I wanted to point out that all of today's sessions have been recorded and will be available on demand for you to review and also share with any interested colleagues. Okay, and with that, this concludes our FinOps Forward event. I hope you enjoyed the sessions, and I want to wish you all well with the rest of your day. Onward and upward.